everyone. Welcome to our second insight and study about anxious for nothing, finding calm. This is your pastor, Yati. I'm going to talk about today in the Lord's sovereignty and rejoicing in it. But first I'm going to say you are chosen, and all who comes and listen to this podcast, you are welcome. No matter what background, no matter what race, whatever, you're welcome. You are blessed, and you are loved with an everlasting love. My dear ones, you can't run the world, but you can trust in God. The Apostle Paul did, rejoicing in the Lord and in trusting Him. If anyone had reasons to be anxious, it was he. Let your imagination transport you 2,000 years back in time. Envision an old man as he gazed out the window of a Roman prison. Paul is about 60 years old, 30 years a Christian, and there is scarcely a seaport on the Mediterranean he doesn't know. See how stooped he is. All angles and curves. Blame his bent back on the miles traveled and be beaten, endured. He received 39 lashes on 5 different occasions. He was beaten with rods on 3. Scars, spiderweb across his skin like bulging veins. He was once left for dead. He has imprisoned, deserted by friends and co-workers, and has endured shipwrecks, storms, and starvation. He's probably half blind, squinting just to read. What's more, he is awaiting trial before the Roman emperor. Nero has learned to curry the favor of the Roman citizens by killing believers, of which Paul is the best known. As if the oppression from the empire weren't enough. Paul also bears the weight of newborn churches. The members are bickering. False preachers are preaching out of pride and envy. Philippians 1, 15 to 17. So much for the easy life of an apostle. His future is as gloomy as his jail cell. Yet to read his words, you think he just arrived at the Jamaican beach hotel. His letters to the Philippians bears not one word of fear or complaint. Not one. He never shakes a fist of God, at God. Instead, he lifts his thanks to God and calls on his readers to do the same. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say, rejoice. Philippians 4 verse 4. Paul's prescription for anxiety begins with a call to rejoice. Paul used every tool in the box on this verse, hoping to get our attention. First, he employed a present imperative tense, so his readers will hear him say continually, habitually, rejoice. And if the verb tense wasn't enough, he removed the expiration date. Rejoice in the Lord always. And if perchance the verb tense and always were inadequate, he repeated the command, again I will say, rejoice. Paul's prescriptions for anxiety begins with a call to rejoice. But how in the world can a person obey this command? Rejoice always. Is it possible for any person to maintain an uninterrupted spirit of gladness? No. This is not Paul's challenge. We are urged to rejoice in the Lord. This verse is a call, not to a feeling, but to a decision and a deeply rooted confidence that God exists, that He is in control, and that He is good. The apostle held firm to this belief. He had erected Castiron, stabilized in the center of his soul. Let Nero rage, let preachers self-promote, let storms blow. Paul's tent of faith would never collapse. He had stabilized it with a sturdy belief system. How sturdy is yours? Flip back to flaps of your soul, and you'll see a series of beliefs that serve like poles to stabilize your life. Your belief system is your answer to the fundamental questions about life. Is anyone in control of the universe? Does life have a purpose? Does I have value? Is this life all there is? Your belief system has nothing to do with your skin, color, appearance, talents, or age. Your belief system is not concerned with the exterior of the tent, but the interior. It is a set of convictions, poles, all of them unseen, upon which your faith depends. If your belief system is strong, you will stand. If it is weak, the storm will prevail. Belief always precedes behavior. For this reason, the Apostle Paul in each of his epistles addressed convictions before he addressed actions. To change the way a person responds to life. Change what a person believes about life. The most important thing about you is your belief system. Paul's was Gibraltar strong. Take a close look at the poles in the tent of the apostle, and you will see one with this inscription: the sovereignty of God. The sovereignty is a term the Bible uses for describes God's perfect control and management of the universe. He preserves and governs every element. He is continually involved with all created things, directing them to act in a way that fulfills His divine purpose. In the treatment of anxiety, a proper understanding of sovereignty is huge. Anxiety is often the consequence of perceived chaos. If we sense we are victims of unseen, turbulent, random forces, we are troubled. Psychologists verified this fact when they studied the impact of combat on soldiers in World War II. They determined that after 60 days of continuous combat, the ground troops became emotionally dead. This reaction is understandable. Soldiers endured a constant threat of bombs, blitzes, machine guns, and enemy snipers. The anxiety of ground troops was no surprise. The comparative calm of fighter pilots, however, was their mortality rate was among the highest in combat. 50% of them was killed in action, yet dogfighters loved their work. An astounding 93% of them claimed to be happy in their assignments, even though the odds of survival were the same as the toss of a coin. What made the difference? Those pilots had their hands on the throttle. They sat in the cockpit. They felt that their fate was theirs to determine. Infantrymen, by contrast, could just as easily be killed standing still or running away. They felt forlorn and helpless. The formula is simple. Perceived control creates calm. Lack of control gives birth to fear. You don't need a war to prove this formula. Road congestions will do just fine. So, what do we do? Control everything? Never board a plane without a parachute? Never enter a restaurant without bringing your own clean silverware? Never leave the house without a gas mask? Never give away your heart for fear of a broken one. Never step on a crack lest you break your mother's back. Face anxiety by taking control. If only we could. Yet certainty is a cruel impostor. A person can accumulate millions of dollars and still lose it in a recession. A health fanatic can eat only nuts and veggies and still battle cancer. A hermit can avoid all human contacts and still struggle with insomnia. We want certainty, but the only certainty is the lack thereof. That's why the most stressed out people are control freaks. They fail at the quest they most pursue. The more they try to control the world, the more they realize they cannot. Life becomes a cycle of anxiety, failures, anxiety, failure, anxiety, failure. We can't take control because control is not ours to take. The Bible has a better idea. Rather than seeking total control, relinquish it. You can't run the world, but you can entrust it to God. This is the message behind Paul's admonition to rejoice in the Lord. Peace is within reach, not for lack of problems, but because of the presence of a sovereign Lord. Rather than rehearse the chaos of the world, rejoice in the Lord's sovereignty, as Paul did. The things which happened to me have actually turned out for the furtherance of the gospel. So that it has become evident to the whole palace guard and to all the rest that my change are in Christ. Words of the Apostle Paul. Philippians 1:12-13. To read Paul is to read the words of a man who in innermost part of his being believed in the steady hand of a good God. He was protected by God's strength, preserved by God's love. He lived beneath the shadow of God's wings. Do you? Stabilize your soul with the sovereignty of God. He reigns supreme over every detail of the universe. There is no wisdom, no insight, no plan that can succeed against the Lord. Proverbs 21 verse 30. God does as he pleases with the powers of heaven and the peoples of the earth. No one can hold back his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" God's answer for troubled times has always been the same. Heaven has an occupied throne. This was certainly the message God gave to the prophet Isaiah. During the 8th century BC, ancient Judah enjoyed a time of relative peace, thanks to the steady leadership of Uzziah, the king. Uzziah was far from perfect, yet he kept the enemies at bay. Though antagonists threatened from all sides, the presence of Uzziah kept the fragile society safe from attack for 52 years. Then Uzziah died. Isaiah, who lived during the reign of the king, was left with ample reason for worry. What would happen to the people of Judah now that Uzziah was gone? Or in your case, what would happen now that your job is gone, or your health has diminished, or the economy has taken a nosedive? Does God have a message for this people when calamity strikes? He certainly had a word for Isaiah. The prophet wrote, "In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above it stood seraphim. Each one had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one cried to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory." Isaiah 6, 1-3. Uzziah's throne was empty, but God's was occupied. Uzziah's reign had ended, but God's had not. Uzziah's voice was silent, but God's was strong. He was and is alive on the throne and worthy of endless worship. God calmed the fears of Isaiah, not by removing the problem, but by revealing his divine power and presence. An arc of his eyebrow, and 1,000,000 angels will pivot and salute. Every throne is a footstool to his. Every crown is papier-mâché next to this. He consults no advisors. He needs no Congress. He reports to no one. He is in charge. Sovereignty gives the saint the inside track to peace. Others see the problems of the world and wring their hands. We see the problem of the world and bend our knees. Jeremiah did. My soul had been rejected from peace. I have forgotten happiness. So I say, my strength has perished, and so has my hope from the Lord. Remember my affliction and my wandering, the wormwood and bitterness. Surely my soul remembers, and is bowed down within me. Lamentation 3:17-20. Jeremiah was a prophet to Judah during one of her darkest periods of rebellion. They called him the weeping prophet, because he was one. He wept at the conditions of the people and the depravity of their fate. He was anxious enough to write a book called Lamentations, but then he considered the work of God. He purposefully lifted his mind to thoughts about his king. Note the intentionality in his words. The Lord's loving kindness indeed never cease, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul, and therefore I have hope in him. The Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the person who seeks him. It is good that he waits silently for the salvation of the Lord. Lamentation 3:21-26. Lift up your eyes. Don't get lost in your trouble. Dare to believe that good things will happen. Dare to believe that God was speaking to you when he said, in everything God works for the good of those who love him. The mind cannot at the same time be full of God and full of fear. He will keep in perfect peace all those who trust in him, whose thoughts turn often to the Lord. Are you troubled, restless, sleepless? Then rejoice in the Lord's sovereignty. Anxiety passes as trust increases. In another scripture, Jeremiah draws a direct connection between faith and peace. Blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord and whose hope is the Lord. For he shall be like a tree planted by the waters, which spreads out its root by the river, and will not fear when heat comes, but its leaves will be green, and will not be anxious in the rest of drought. Jeremiah 17:7-8. Examine the poles that sustains your belief. Make sure one of them is etched with the words, "My God is sovereign." May the Lord's peace be with you and stays with you. And may His light shine above you and keep you safe. Have a blessed day. Work with what you just heard. God is real. And you can trust Him. Have a wonderful day. This is your Pastor Yadi. Bye-bye.